I think I'm going to have to talk about tariffs again. I've been talking about tariffs quite a lot, but there doesn't seem to actually be anything else in the news. I don't know if you guys have...
I mean, looking at our segments, yeah, there's not much been going on, really.
Yeah, it's all been about tariffs. So I've been talking about tariffs a lot. I did this video on tariffs last week, where I kind of gave it a bit of an intro and my perspective on the sort of general direction of things. Then I did a Brokenomics on that, where I went into a bit more detail, the sort of basic tier of how these tariffs work and the mechanisms behind it and all that kind of stuff. Then yesterday I did a 3-hour live stream with Academic Agent on a tariff debate. You watched it, Harry. What did you think?
I thought it was an interesting discussion. The shame was that it was two separate discussions going on parallel with one another.
Right.
You weren't really debating the same thing. AA was looking at this from a potential short-term consequences angle, where he was looking at if there are price increases of products due to the tariffs, how is this going to affect the next election for the Republicans?
He was very concerned about Jamal, wasn't he, and his trainers.
His Nikes. They're very important to Jamal, and Jamal does get as much of a vote as everybody else. So it was something important to think about in the short term. You were looking at it from a broader, long-term geopolitical strategy.
Exactly right. So, I mean, AA is very good. World-class thinker on... elite theory and all that sort of stuff. So top chat. We like having him whenever we can. He does have a slight hint of the Peter Hitchens about him.
Don't we all these days?
Yes. What?
Don't we all these days?
Well, yes.
I mean, I'm maybe not less the contrarian, more the just unending misery.
Well, there is that. So he was coming in from the perspective of the short-term power plays and stuff, and I was coming. So if you want to see two people of the right, even if one of them likes to be a bit contrarian to the right, then that would be an interesting discussion about the current state of things. And what I thought I'd do in this segment is, because tariffs are dominating everything again, I will go through a little bit deeper into my thinking of it. Some of the stuff that I mentioned in that live stream, although without the back and forwards quite so much. Also, if you've got a question, Josh has very kindly said that I can run into his segment a little bit. So if you have a question, put it in a Rumble rant, and I'll try and answer it in this segment. And if you're a subscriber, put your question in the comments, and I'll get you another bloody full Brokenomics, and I'll go much deeper into your comments. So there you go. Everybody's got a chance to get into this.
So that also means that you're not reading the comments at the end today, right? Because
yeah,
I'm saving them all up for your...
Well, I'll do the Rumble rants today, but the subscriber comments I'll save for the Brokenomics so that I can go into them properly and with full detail. But any comments on yours, I'm sure we can do as before. Right, so let's start off with the setup behind this, because one of the things that's become apparent to me as I've been talking about this over the course of the last week is a lot of people are working on the assumption that everything was hunky-dory up until Trump put the tariffs on, as if everything was fine. That's not entirely the case. This is a map showing who your largest trading partner is, given the binary choice between the US and China. So, for example, Turkey's largest trading partner is actually Germany. That aside, right, between the split between the US and China, you can just see that China is dominating, apart from basically the collective West.
Apart from a little bit of Central America, Canada, and Europe. And even then, Eastern Europe's on China, Spain's with China.
What's going on in Spain?
Australia.
Well, they are ever so.
Yeah, that's true.
Australia and New Zealand, members of Five Eyes, they've gone over. So, I mean, this is not the sort of thing you can ignore for military reasons, which I will come back to in a bit. The other thing that you want to bear in mind is I think a lot of people were under the assumption that the COVID-era debt, and more broadly the last 30 years of rampant deficit spending, huge government expenditure and debt accumulation, I think they thought it was all free.
Well, it sort of is, in that when they held, the default world reserve currency, a lot of their debts were basically inconsequential to them because they could just print more money and devalue the debt that they had.
Well, it lets you accumulate the debt for free, but the servicing cost of the debt isn't free. So I think $1 trillion a year now is going just to servicing the debt. So yes, it's pretty much free at the point of creation. They can push it out there during the mechanisms that you described, but you still need to pay the ongoing bill on it.
It's because the world has moved away from the dollar as a reserve currency to a significant degree from the year 2000.
Yeah.
And also the debt has gone up, and so those interest payments are now extortionate. Really,
I mean they're not bigger than Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid at the moment, but they've already exceeded the size of the military, for example, just paying the debt. And if you look at this, I mean, Americans have allowed themselves to cover up all sorts of sins in inefficient government, in bloated government, jobs. COVID is a classic example of this. A lot of the people enthusiastic about it, the leftists and the boomers, for example, just thought that they could have it for free. And if you could do that, why wouldn't you just always have a situation where people stayed home and didn't go to work and got handouts?
We all still went to work.
Well, yes. Well, I didn't because I wasn't here at the time. I was getting very annoyed at home.
That's true.
Being stared at by the neighbours every time I
was working from home, so I was still working.
Right. Yeah, one of the few. Not if you worked in the government, you wouldn't have been. You would have been sat at home watching Netflix. But basically, the bill for COVID is and you can see the huge jump in the debt. The bill for that is coming due now because most of that debt was done on a 5-year rollover, and it's 5 years later. So the bill is coming due, and basically the US has 10 trillion in debt to roll over the course of the next year. So and the other thing that's changed, of course, is that interest rates at the time when it was done was about 1%, and now they're about 5%. So that's an extra 400 billion that they're going to have to pay. Now, if you think about what Elon Musk is doing with Doge, a really good outcome for Doge would be that they cut, say, 400 billion. So all of Doge's efforts could be wiped out if these debt costs don't come down fast. So that's the setup. Please don't assume that if everything was going to be hunky-dory if Trump did nothing. That was absolutely not the case. I'll give you another bit of broader perspective. Let's hear from Mr. Vance, shall we? Can you play this from about 28 seconds in?
All of us to step back and ask ourselves, what has the globalist economy gotten the United States of America? And the answer is fundamentally it's based on two principles: incurring a huge amount of debt to buy things that other countries make for us. And to make it a little bit more crystal clear, we borrow money from Chinese peasants to buy the things those Chinese peasants manufacture. That is not a recipe for economic prosperity. It's not a recipe for low prices, and it's not a recipe for good jobs in the United States of America. For 40 years, we have gone down that pathway. We've seen closing factories. We've seen rising inflation. We've seen the cost of housing so high that most Americans can't afford to buy a home right now. President Trump is taking this economy in a different direction. He ran on that, he promised it, and now he's delivering. And yes, this is a big change. I'm not going to shy away from it, but we needed a big change, Lawrence. We cannot keep going down the Joe Biden globalist pathway where we have $2 trillion of peacetime debt and deficits. We have manufacturing disappearing. That is not working for Americans. We've got to take this country in a different direction.
So, good points by Vance. Wasn't it fun 2 weeks ago when we were just making memes of Vance?
I did enjoy that, yeah.
Yes.
Oh, this is JD Vance.
Yes.
I thought he was a lot fatter.
Yes.
Curlier hair.
Yeah.
Long curly hair and a deranged grin. But no, he's fair point.
Right, so a quick recap from my very long debate yesterday. I'll try and sum it up a little bit sharper today. Here's my sort of broad macro arguments for what's going on here. Let me find them out. Here we go. Right, so first thing you've got to bear in mind is the dollar's exorbitant privilege. So that basically its ability to run huge deficits supported by debt indefinitely is not an immutable law of nature. And actually, the dollar is at greater risk of dying from its strength than its weakness. The reason being is that if the dollar is too strong, 50% of world's debt are denominated in dollars, it basically suffocates the system. So the dollar was too strong, had to come down. As I mentioned, the US has 10 trillion in COVID-era debt to roll over in the next year, and you've got to get rates lower than nominal growth, right? Basically, my thinking there is the economy is about the same size as the debt. So the debt to GDP ratio is 100%. So given that they're the same size, if the debt grows faster than the economy, then it's going to swallow everything, and then you're in a debt spiral, which is bad. So you've got to get those rates below the growth rate. More there about the debt rollover. The dollar's a wrecking ball. It's too strong. 50%. Blah blah blah. Yeah, I said that. Particularly in China. So China's in an interesting situation. We're going to have to come back to them because they're part of the big meltdown that is going on right at this very moment. China also has a vast amount of debt that it needs to roll over this year, and it's in a bit of a tricky situation. So they need this even more. So it's a bit odd, some of the things that are happening at the moment.
It is also worth adding on to that the Chinese still need to restructure their entire way in which they distribute money to their local governments, because at the minute people are sort of surprised by this, but the local districts or regional governments have a certain degree of autonomy. It's why the social credit score thing is very different depending on where you are in China, because it's all done by these regional governments, and they've been using their assets as collateral for loans, and then eventually the loans have got so large that they don't have enough assets to get any future loans. So they've got to more or less restructure that system, and this is all coming at the same time that the US is whacking large tariffs on them.
Yeah, they're in a right pickle for a number of reasons, and yet there is this brinkmanship going on with the US at the moment, which I will come back to, but that is certainly an issue. As well as the debt refi cycle, which is really important, you've also got to be thinking about the manufacturing and strategic supply lines, including military. So what am I thinking of there? Well, one, a recent Pentagon study found that the US military fails at hundreds of separate points because it is reliant on Chinese supply chains in order to function. Now, I would suggest that if you are a superpower and you're worried about an up-and-coming superpower, you don't make your military fail if the other superpower that you're a rival with doesn't want to cooperate with you. I think that is bad, and presumably the Trump admin has come to the same conclusion, even though obviously Biden and Obama were not particularly concerned about that. The US share of global manufacturing has declined 11 points over the last decade, from 28.4%. So the US used to have 28.4% of global manufacturing, and that's down to 17.4%. Related to that map that I showed you earlier.
So that's going to be both the fact that the US has deindustrialized, as well as a lot of the world has been industrializing as well. So it's being pushed from both fronts.
Yeah, it's being squeezed, absolutely. But that is a trend that is accelerating, so you would expect the next 10 points to come even quicker. That's the issue there. And we are literally in the process right now of watching the US lose a war against Russia because Russia can outproduce munitions. Which is important. I know that's not Trump's war. That is a war that he inherited. But I mean, that is the reality of it. It is effectively a US proxy war against Russia, and they're losing it because they can't produce. And what do I say at the end? Oh yeah, I remind us that the US is not a superpower because of the dollar. Some people are getting this a bit mixed up. It's really a superpower because of its military, which allows it then to enforce its dollar will. And I won't go into now, exactly how that came about.
But the strength of your military is also determined by the strength of your economy, and the best measure of that in terms of sort of martial economy is industry, right? Part of the reason that the US was so important in World War II is that they had the best industrial capacity.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, that was really when they emerged as the superpower.
Exactly.
It was as a result of that. So to go with this, I have put together this handy chart. It's a bit blown up on our screen, Samson. I don't know if you might need to reduce it. As long as the audience can see that. There we go. That looks good. So I put together this handy chart with emojis explaining the whole situation, because one of the pushbacks that I've had on this whole tariff thing is people looking to identify different messages and say, well, look, if people can't agree what the tariffs are for, well, that must invalidate the whole argument then. Because if there's any confusion over, give me one reason why these tariffs exist. There is not one reason why these tariffs exist. So there's three broad buckets as to why the tariffs are going in. So there's the trade issue, which is the US manufacturing, the big deficits, the lack of blue-collar jobs, the US getting hollowed out. Trump is a champion of that. He's been talking about this for 40 years. And I think that if Trump had come in and he was still the only person in the admin who was enthusiastic for this, it would have been like last time, where he did a little bit of tariffs and he did something, but it wasn't earth-shattering like this. The whole reason why this tariff thing is as big as it is because he's got these second two camps who've signed up to this as well. So what are those second two camps? Well, the money camp, which is the huge US debt, it's global debt, too much dollar-denominated debt out there. Rates are too high and the dollar is too high. It's suffocating everybody. People can't roll over their debts. They can't release global liquidity, all of that stuff. And the real champion there is Scott Bessent. This is as you can imagine, being a money guy and do brokeronomics, this is probably the one that I focus on the most. What I'm saying is along with Trump's reasons for doing this, you then get the money guys wanting to do this as well for their own reasons, but the policy achieves what they're trying to achieve as well. Then you've got the military guys, which is, the problem is as simple as this. The US military relies on China, which is obviously bonkers. I put the champion down as Pete Hegseth. Actually, he's not been incredibly vocal on this, but there was a broad remit of military guys who understand that you just can't have a situation where China is, able to turn off your military. Obviously bonkers. So then I've got what does winning like for each of these camps? Well, for the trade guys, it's all about getting jobs back and getting the deficit down. And it's kind of as simple as that. So when you hear Peter Navarro going out, he's being very bellicose on this. He focuses purely on those two things, which is why you're getting different messages from different people, because he is only focused on those things, and that's a win for him. For the trade guys, losing would look like backing down. And that is the whole effort at the moment, is to do so much reeing and so much screaming that Trump feels the need to back off and just give up on these things. I don't think Trump is the sort of chap who backs down because people are reeing.
I saw an old tweet from 2014 where he's saying some people are artists, I'm paraphrasing a little bit here, they might work in marble or on a canvas, but my art form is in deal making, and making the best deals is how I basically get my enjoyment.
Yes.
And if you've got that sort of mindset, you're probably not going to just say, you know what, I back down.
Yes.
Because that's a bad deal.
I suspect he's going to hold the line on this, but we will see. That's where all the effort is going, trying to make him back down. Right, the money guys. How do they win? Well, they get the dollar down. They get their 10 trillion of debt rolled over at manageable levels, and they probably get a Mar-a-Lago Accord. Now, what do I mean by that? Is that so with each of these, people have said in the debate yesterday, some of the comments were saying I'm just reaching and theorizing. No, these guys have been very clear on what they want. These guys have been very clear. Scott Bessent has been writing articles and doing interviews for years, making all of these points, and the military guys are making all of these points. So there is no guessing as to what people want. And what winning looks like and what losing looks like. That there's no theory whatsoever in this. The people have been very clear. So the Mar-a-Lago Accords, what is that? That is something that Scott Bessent brings up every time he does an interview on this, is that there is going to need to be a new trade order in the world. Now, these new trade orders, they come around every sort of 80 to 100 years. The last time would have been after the Second World War. But you can keep going back, and there will be a new trade order that's put in when there's a change of hegemon. So either a new trade order, a viable trade order, gets set up now when the US is still hegemon, or you wait until China are a co-equal partner or even ahead, and then you do the trade and renegotiation. So they obviously want to do the trade and renegotiate now, and that's getting the acronym there. Well, the name Mar-a-Lago Accords, which I will come back to in a future Brokeronomics at some point. And what does losing look like to them? Well, it's going to be if the debt cost goes up. That'd be very bad for them. As I mentioned, they want to roll over this debt close as possible to what it was last time, not some great multiple of that. Okay, the military guys, what does winning look like for them? It's going to be self-reliance, or at least allies. I think the US military might be able to live with it if their supply chain had some Indian input, for example, or some other place. Maybe they could be a bit more comfortable. Ultimately, they would like to
a scammer division, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, preferably they want to bring it all back in-house. That would be the best win. But you most certainly don't want it to be in China, obviously.
Also, India's still relatively close to China and very invadable.
So I wouldn't say that moving it from out from China to India is a win. I'd just say it's not as bad as China, but ultimately you do want to bring it all back in. And what does losing look like for them? Well, it's if China can outproduce them. So this is a point that JD Vance makes. There is a single Chinese shipyard that has outputted more commercial ships in a year than the US has in its entire period since World War II. Now, those are commercial ships, but obviously that could be retooled for military ships pretty quickly. If anyone who's ever played a 4X strategy game knows that basically whoever's got the biggest econ just wins, because your military is downstream of that. Also, losing would look like the China having the ability to turn off the US military whenever. Okay, so how are people reacting to this? So on basically everybody is going to want to like the money stuff. Longer term, China won't be so in love with it if they get the Mar-a-Lago Accords, because they want to set the new trade order. But China very, very much needs to get the dollar lower because it's got a lot of debt to roll over, and things that Josh was talking about as well. So everybody is in favour of the money angle of this. When it comes to the military angle, EU would probably, EU knows where it is with having the US as the superpower, so they're broadly happy with the Chinese being cut out of it. The rest of the world, it depends on which country really, but they're broadly happy with this. Obviously, China is not happy with the US military being independent of itself. So I've put them, yes. I don't know for sure. I'm not in a WhatsApp chat with Z, but I'm going
Get
out
invited to one from what I've heard.
Maybe they'll be thrilled that it could be more of a fair fight.
Possibly.
China's known for its honourable dealings.
Yes, maybe they're looking for a good old scrap, fair fight.
Yep.
More sporting.
Not to the end. Total war over. Let's just do it until we see who gets their military objectives, and then peace. Right?
Possibly.
That's how it works in the modern era.
But for the people who say I'm speculating, I am speculating that China would not like that. And then over on the trade side. EU they started off being very belligerent, but they're now making noises about, okay, we want a zero rate deal with the US. The concern for the EU is that if they get into a zero rate trade arrangement with the US, they are vastly over-regulated, so they might be able to compete with California, but they're going to get their trousers taken down by the rest of the US. So they will then end up getting into a race to the bottom on regulation, which is not what they want to do, because
But it sounds great for us.
Yes, it would be good. I think the UK is going to be fine with this because we don't produce anything anyway, so it doesn't matter. But
we've got an aerospace industry, lots of aviation stuff.
That's true. Yes, we have got a little
high manufacturing.
We have got a little bit of something.
My town produces Bentleys.
There you go.
We produce something.
Okay, so we produce a little bit, so we're fine. But I didn't bother putting us on the chart because. Well, we didn't. Anyway, China...
I will say, just the one thing regarding the deficits that's annoyed me a little bit is regarding the EU has been the American whining that apparently the EU has been screwing them over with this trade deficit for untold decades, when really it's like, well, Trump in particular has been saying, they barely buy any of our cars. They don't fit in our roads.
Mm-hmm.
That's
they don't buy wheels on the wrong side as well.
They don't buy any of our food. You've got RFK in there for a reason.
Yes,
we don't want your food. We've got our own farmers. That's been
like
the one,
our own food as well.
Yeah, that's been the one thing that's annoyed me about that.
We are never going to buy a Cadillac over here.
It's impractical.
I would like one, but it wouldn't necessarily be a go-to.
It would stay in the garage. It would be a party piece. Hey, look at that! Want to go for a drive? No.
I mean, I did buy an American. I bought a Tesla, so that sort of counts. But I'm not buying one of those.
Yeah, but Teslas are a bit more adaptable, and
Yes.
they're basically like little toy Hot Wheels blown up anyway. So
Yes, yes, that is fair. Right, so then I thought let's have a look at the generations as well. So we've got boomers, Gen X, millennials, and Zoomers. Right, boomers are losing their shit right now because they've basically got all the stocks, and stocks are down. I will come back to that, but boomers are very unhappy at the moment. Gen Xers do actually have a modest stock portfolio, nothing like the boomers, so they are also down. But Gen Xers, we're a different breed. We're used to being kicked in the teeth so often that we kind of like it at this point. And actually we're thinking longer term about all this stuff anyway, so it doesn't particularly matter. Whereas the millennials and Zoomers, and I will come back to this, they are absolutely loving this because they haven't got anything to lose.
No assets, yay.
Yes, they don't have any assets, they don't have any stocks, they don't have any prospects.
Or a future.
Yes, so why not lean into this? Right. Very
terms of it now.
I might skip over this Mar-a-Lago record, but it's just somebody's theory on how that. But I'll skip over that because it is taking a bit long. Right. So how is this going? So here is the DXY, the dollar. So it's basically the US dollar against a whole bunch of other currencies. How is that holding up? Remember the win criteria is this would come down, but it's choppy over the past 5 days. But it is lower on a here's a month time scale. DXY was basically too high. It was up there at sort of 104, and now it did come down lower, and now it's a bit higher. So there's pretty much a bit of a win here. So we're happy with that one. Cost of debt, right? So again, let's do a shorter thing. This would have been going up. There we go. So it initially came down more sharply, and now it's up again. And what you're getting at the moment is an awful lot of people on financial Twitter who are clipping a bit of it. What they'll probably do is they just clip that bit there and say, "Oh my God, debt is going vertical, panic, panic, panic," all that kind of stuff. I mean, just step over, just ignore. If you zoom out, there you go. Debt cost is still down, so that is broadly moving in the right direction. So don't get caught up in all. Yes, it has spiked between the absolute low after it was announced and up to there, but it's still moving in the right direction as a broad trend. So I'm not going to get too upset about
why was it going in a negative trend in the first place, even before this, if you don't mind?
Well, because people didn't see any point in owning anything else other than US assets. So money was flowing in. This is kind of the global risk-free rate, and they kind of needed to get bond prices to move so they could get this rate down to a serviceable level, because this is what they're going to be rolling over that 10 trillion of debt on. So if they can get this down, that is a win, and it's not come down as much as you might have hoped. But again, all the people on Twitter telling you that this is blowing up, and the CNBCs, again, it's just not actually that bad. What else have I got? Oh yeah, so this is returning to the China thing, because what has been happening is, okay, rates were coming down, but the trend has shifted. Now they're going up again, not back to the level they were, which is why I showed the chart before. But things are moving up, and the renminbi, the Chinese currency, is also going up. So we've got a couple of competing theories as to what's going on here. This guy is sort of suggesting one side of this is that China. So there's two camps at the moment. There's people that think that China is selling off US treasuries to spite them, which is bold, because it will hurt the US, but it will also hurt China a lot as well, because they need their renminbi lower. So we are in the process of finding out as to whether that is the thing or not. Also on China, minutes before we came on air, I quickly checked the news feed, only to find that they are retaliating to the US's retaliation to the retaliation of their tariffs. Right, so they've added. So basically, the US put on tariffs, or whatever it was, 34%. So China put on 34% onto the US, and then the US put extra tariffs on. and now China have put another 50% on, like a few minutes before we came on air.
I have a question here.
Yes.
How many retaliatory tariffs do they have to put on one another before it's declared a formal trade war? Because it seems to be at that point already.
I don't know if there's a formal definition of trade.
There probably isn't.
I think it's safe to say we're in it.
Yeah.
And just a quick note, tariffs don't go up to 100%, they go up to infinity percent. So whatever. Let's have a quick look into this article it's only just popped up. So yeah, the US rate on China is now 104%. And China is at 84%, although the US would say that currency manipulations count for more than that.
So 104% would pretty much be double and a little bit more.
Yeah, so when you buy your next piece of Chinese tat, at the point where it comes into the country to the importer, whatever they paid for it, they then need to pay 104% of that as a tax, as a tariff, and then add their markup, and then it goes on Amazon. So it's still going to cost like £6 for, a toaster or something, but it's just not going to be as cheap as it was.
That's fine, because it's rubbish anyway.
Well, yes, I mean, none of this Chinese stuff lasts more than a year or two. So, I mean, a lot of people are upset about it, but do you really need it? I mean, that's my view on it.
Jamal's and his Nikes, man.
Yes. Yeah, well, yes. So, yeah, Vietnam got hit with a whole bunch of tariffs. So whatever price Nike pays when they import them from the factory in Vietnam is going to get whatever it is, 67% or
and is Jeff's chai latte from Starbucks going up as well?
Yes, a bunch of things will come in. You're going to have to bear. You're going to have to bear in mind that the input price that the importer pays is a fairly small percentage, because the biggest markup is actually when it goes into the shop or what the importer gets.
Here's a quick question.
Yeah.
So, as I understand it, then, if exporting in a US direction, as in if the US is buying less stuff from abroad, does that mean that the global price of a lot of goods is going to go down as the demand has gone down, and therefore prices in Europe would actually be lower, minus the tariffs from the US?
So a lot of this Chinese stuff is flowing into America, and it looks like a lot less of it is going to be flowing into America. So China has the problem of excess capacity. One way they might deal with that is by lowering the prices into everywhere else. And the other people with a consumerist, debt-driven mindset would be UK and Europe. So yeah, maybe we have more. So maybe we can get extra Chinese tat that we don't need, because Americans are being edged out of it price-wise.
We can sort of drop ship it to the Americans with our lower tariff. Be like a middleman. Yes. Like India for Russian oil to Europe.
If we had no shame whatsoever, we could pivot to being drop shippers.
I'm not suggesting we do that, by the way.
Some people I've noticed...
Revenue stream, anyone?
Yeah.
Yes, Lotus Eaters branded toasters or something. Maybe that's what...
Yeah, we spend 1 penny on the logo that we stick on the Chinese toaster, and then we mark it up 10 times.
Although we will then have a 10% tariff going into America, but I think we can deal with that. Yeah,
we'll be fine.
One of the things I've noticed, a lot of people on social media have been saying that China can make its population suffer, because China has the bigger trade deficit with the US, so it does hurt them more. Plus, they've got their own problems to deal with, which I haven't really got time to get into now, but maybe I'll do that in the Brokenomics. But a lot of people have been saying, well, because China is a dictatorship, it can just do that indefinitely because it doesn't have to worry about its people. Clearly you disagree, quite sensibly.
Yeah, well, the Chinese people have seen a very accelerated standard of living, and the whole reason that the CCP has sort of a hegemonic power over the Chinese people is that their standard of living has got markedly better. And the entire reason that their governance exists unquestioningly, or at least appears to exist unquestioningly, is because people broadly agree that their life is getting better in the future. And if that stops, that is a big problem for everyone in China.
If the Chinese leadership has to deal with hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of unemployed men with nothing to lose pouring out of those southern factories back into the cities, they've got a problem. So we will see who blinks first. Maybe I'm going to have to follow up with another segment next week when the actual shooting war between China and the US begins, or maybe the Chinese Civil War begins, or somebody backs down.
If China ends up murdering an incredible portion of its own population, that would just be another footnote in the many times China.
Yes, China has done that quite a lot.
Quite a few times.
Yes.
In recent memory as well.
Yeah. Yes. Other people are less concerned about the China situation. Zero Hedge is going absolutely nuclear about the basis trade blowing up, which is basically where hedge funds take US treasuries and then they turn them through the futures market. And basically they leveraged into it to such an extent that they are in trouble. So everybody who is sympathetic to hedge funds who are over-leveraged, this is your moment to break out the violin. The reason I stick it up on screen is because it creates a problem for Jerome Powell and the Fed, because Jerome Powell and the Fed do not like Trump. They do not want to get on board. They don't want to help out by anything that they can do by, as this sort of image shows, bailing out Trump's trade war. But they don't want to let their friends blow up either, because they probably they go to dinner parties of these people and they want to get jobs with them afterwards. So the Fed is in a particular pickle at the moment. Then I thought, let's talk about the boomers as well. Josh, I'm a bit over time. Can I have a bit more time, or should I skip the boomer bit? What do you think?
I'm hosting. Ask me.
All right. What can I do?
Yeah, go for it.
Right.
Yeah, I approve as well.
Right. Okay. Good. Right. So this is the S&P 500. Boomers are absolutely freaking out because look, let's put it on the 5-day. Actually, let's put it on the month. There we go. So the S&P 500 used to be up here at what is that?
I assume this is one of those, because I'm not an economist, so I assume that this is one of those graphs where the idea was line go up infinity.
Well,
yes.
The whole point of the S&P 500 is that it's the top 500 companies, and because it's a diversified portfolio, the line forever goes up, and in fact, it's quite rare for it to go down.
So there we go. A few weeks back, that was at sort of 5,700, and here we are. We've lost 700 points on the S&P. So you might think, oh my God, that's catastrophic, and the boomers are going absolutely mental about this. Let's put it on a 5-year view. We're back to levels not seen since
mid last year.
Yeah.
It's also worth mentioning as well, most people investing in the S&P 500 are doing it more on the long term, aren't they? To try and beat inflation rather than in a safe investment. So not necessarily going in there for a short trade.
Right. So finally, let's get into this absolute massive boomer schism, because I think it's funny. And you guys, because I've rambled over a bit, so you guys stop me when you've had enough of this. But this is Tim Weiss. For all you mega cultists who keep saying the market slump doesn't matter because 20 and 30-year-olds have had plenty of time to make up losses. Seriously, what's your answer for people retiring now who thought they were good until you guys effed it up? What's your answer? Tough shit.
Yes.
Funnily enough, the Zoomers and the millennials in the comments are not massively sympathetic.
Boo-hoo, you get to retire. I'm going to work until I'm dead. I don't care.
Yes.
Didn't most of these people that he's castigating now have to shut their entire lives down a few years ago, at the expense of all of this debt that needs to be repaid now, purely for the sake of Tim Wise feeling a bit more secure in himself?
Funny you mention that. Some people are recycling some of his own comments back to him. He said a couple of years ago, when you millennials and Gen Z assholes stop congregating in large numbers because you're young and you can handle COVID-19, perhaps we respect you. Until then, we don't care about your college debt, and no precious, we won't be paying your cellular bills anymore. Good luck.
What goes around comes around.
Yes.
Sounds a bit.
So people have been giving Tim advice. Stop buying avocado toast.
Maybe he's going to have to cancel that 5th cruise of the year.
Yes, some people are saying, look, go into plumbing, learn to code.
Have we got any Visit Canada comments here?
Yeah, have you tried euthanizing yourself?
Yes. Somebody suggested that. This guy's saying, look, you can pull yourself by your bootstraps. Hard work pays off. Stop buying so much avocado toast and fancy letters. Get an entry-level job to get your foot in the door.
Wait. What if he goes in and gives the manager a firm handshake?
Yes. Top advice.
I literally got that advice from my dad when I was a teenager.
Advice?
It never worked.
The handshake wasn't firm enough.
Oh, clearly, that must have been the problem. Yeah.
Yep. Have you tried a side hustle, pick up some extra shifts and overtime? So the reason I threw this in there is because there is a bit of a generational divide over this one, and Zoomers and millennials, they just really don't care because they're not invested in the system.
People of Harry and I's age have nothing invested in the system. All it does is extract money from us. So why should we care if it burns down?
Generally, about a quarter of my wages every single month go to taxes and all sorts of things. And that's even before council tax and value-added tax on every purchase I make as well. So good luck saving.
We're paying money to a system that screws us over actively.
Is actively replacing
Yeah,
it.
so why would we care?
Yeah. They can pull themselves up by their bootstraps, take the Panda Express assistant manager job with a smile, blah, blah, blah. You get loads of this.
Oh, that was the Chris Rufo one, wasn't it?
Yep.
About the Panda Express manager.
Well, they get paid really well.
I mean, in America, yeah. Oh, that was a famous Tim Wise comment about how white people are going to go extinct, and he's not going to be sad about it because it's a good thing, actually.
Yes.
That's an interesting take from him.
Yes, is indeed. So,
I wonder what would motivate that.
Remarkable lack of sympathy from him on many fronts there. Yeah, okay. So anyway, this is developing. Haven't had a chance to do anything more than a bit of reaction on this one and what's going on. I'll do a Brokenomics when I get into it more.
If you would like to watch the full uncut version that is also uncensored, head on over to lotuseaters.com to find out more.